Hello and welcome to day 3 of the recruiting management product training. On our agenda for today, we will discuss that there is one candidate profile XML template. We'll download this template and we'll open it in Notepad. We will review the XML and we'll discuss how the fields are constructed. We will explain the difference between a standard field and a custom field. We'll take a look at the definition of background elements. We'll also discuss SM mapping between the internal candidate profile and the employee profile. We'll take a look at dynamic groups, which allow recruiters or different users to be able to edit candidate profile fields on behalf of the candidate. We'll discuss field permissions. So this will include read and write permissions for internal and external candidates. We'll also take a look at manage templates, which is a tool in Admin Center which allows the customers to make changes or modify any of the existing templates in the system. So that means they don't have to access provisioning. And on the last slide, we also have some exercises that you can complete in your own time. The candidate profile template is unique because there's only one candidate profile template in the system. Customers can configure multiple requisition, application, or offer templates, but there's only one profile template in the system. So this is something that you're going to hear throughout the next couple of videos, that there's only one template. As you progress through the different days of training and you look at job requisition and application and offer, there may be multiple templates. These templates may have different fields available. There may be different read and write permissions based on the business case, or whatever use case the customer may have for having the different templates. But for today, I want you to remember that there is only one candidate profile template. So the same profile template will apply to all candidates, and the fields will be displayed based on permissions, and we can do this using permissions for an internal candidate or an external candidate, or both. The XML template is configured in provisioning. It can also be accessed through Admin Center and in Manage Templates. So we will cover that later in the training, but Admin Center, Manage Templates, this is the area where the customer can make changes to the template. They're not looking at the XML code. They have a nice simple user interface where they can easily click and drag and edit different fields in the UI. To edit the candidate profile template, we need to access provisioning. We can go back here to the company listing. We'll open the company customer ID and we can search for edit candidate profile. We will see this heading here and it's under manage recruiting. So let's open up this. In this text editor, we'll see the XML code. So we can copy this by pressing Ctrl A on our keyboard and then pressing Ctrl C. And we'll open a plain text editor such as Notepad++. So I'm going to copy this here. You can see that it's unformatted. It looks like plain text. So we can select language and then select XML. So this will apply some formatting and some colors. It's going to make it a lot easier to be able to read the XML code. What's really important is that when we're working with XML templates is that we store a backup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open another tab here in Notepad++, pasting again, and I'm going to save this. So I'm going to save this as CPT backup training, and I'm going to store this on my PC. So the reason that I'm doing this is that when we're working in XML, we'll be doing a lot of troubleshooting and some testing. And what's really important is that we keep a backup so that any changes that we do make, we can easily revert these changes by uploading the previous template. In the slides here, you'll see that it says, when we save form, the system will generate warnings and errors caused by misconfigurations of the template. So on upload of the template, when we're clicking save form, you may receive some green warnings, which are validation warnings, or we may also see some red errors. So these will point out issues in the template. It could be misconfiguration, or there could be some syntax errors also. So by validating the template and clicking Save Form, it's a common way to diagnose some configuration issues. We're going to begin now by taking a look at the XML definitions. XML field definitions in all templates will follow the same basic structure. The attributes we will see most commonly are ID, type, required, custom, and anonymize. So as we progress through the different training days and we talk about the job requisition template, the application template, and the offer template, we're going to see the same basic structure to a field definition. Please note that field labels and field descriptions and the relevant translation labels are also present in the field definition. So I want to assure you that if this is your first time working with XML and it's your first time looking at a field definition, if this may seem a little difficult today, as we progress through the different trainings, it is going to get a lot easier because, as this slide mentions, all field definitions in all the templates, they will follow the same basic structure. So we're going to be seeing these time and time again. And we'll begin now by taking a look at each of the attributes in a little bit more detail. The field ID must be unique within the candidate profile. Certain field definition IDs are predefined in the product as standard, whereas custom fields can have custom field IDs and do not follow a standard convention. So in the recruiting product and as part of the implementation guide, we have standard fields. These standard fields are predefined. So an example here is first name. This field is a standard field and it must be defined as per the instructions in the implementation guide, but it also must have the associated field type. So in the example first name, the associated field type will be first name. In contrast to this, we have custom fields. These can be completely customizable, which means they can be called whatever they like as per what the customer decides. So they can have a custom field ID and they can also be any field type. So an example there is a customer may want to have a field which is called house number. House number may not be a standard field, so they can create a custom field. They can call it house number and they can store whatever data type they want there. So they can choose to have it as text or they can choose to have it as a number field. The type attribute defines the data that the system accepts into that corresponding field. Some examples here are text, text area, date, number, or pick list. And we will take a look at each of the field definitions of each of these types later in the slide deck. Required. This attribute defines whether or not a field is mandatory. In order to save a candidate profile, you must provide a value for this field if the field is required equals true. An example here again could be first name. So unless you provide a value for the candidate profile first name field, you will not be able to save the profile. Custom. So this ties in quite closely with the field ID. Custom denotes whether or not the field is a standard field or a custom field. There are two values here, custom equals true and custom equals false. Quite simply, if a field is custom equals true, that means it's a custom field, but if it's defined as custom equals false, it is a standard field. And there's a note here at the bottom of the slide which states that standard fields are predefined and must use the associated field type from the implementation guide. We're going to take a look at the XML now to take a look at an example field definition and discuss these attributes again. So here's my XML template, and let's scroll to the top. We can take a look at the example here of first name. When using a text editor like Notepad++, it's extremely useful. Here we can see a field definition for the field first name. But we also notice here that it highlights for us the beginning and the end of the field definition. So everything contained within this red line here, this section, is related to the field first name. So you can quickly see here the opening of the field definition, and down here we have the closing statement for the field definition. So let's take a look at the attributes across the top here. We can see that this field ID is first name. We notice that it's not using any hyphens or any underscores, as this is not supported. It's quite simply first name, and we see some camel casing here as part of the syntax too. The type of data that this field will store is text. Required equals true, and what this means is that this is a mandatory field. So a candidate must provide a value first name in order to create or save their profile. Custom. Custom is equal to false. So if we see custom is equal to false, we know that this is a standard field, meaning that the field ID must be spelt exactly as outlined in the implementation guide, so first name, and it must use the associated type, which is type text. And again, this field type text is coming from the implementation guide. We also see two other attributes here, anonymize equals true. So anonymize equals true means that this field first name will contain personally identifiable information, meaning that when our system will run its purge routines, either DRM or DRTM purge, and the candidate profile will be anonymized, this is where we tell the system that first name must also be anonymized. So that means that when we're removing data from the system, we're telling the system to remove the value for first name. And again, this is for data regulation. So depending on the location, if you're in Europe, this could be GDPR. Based on this EU regulation, when removing data from the system, you must remove all personally identifiable information. So anonymize equals true and anonymize equals false. We're going to see this throughout the different templates, and you should get a little bit more familiar with it. Lastly, we see sensitive equals false. This is a new attribute. It currently does not have any functionality, but in the coming releases, this will become used. There's a KBA, which I have open, which says that this field currently does not have any functionality. Here we see the KBA where this tag was released in the Q3 release of 2017. So the sensitive attribute can be used to identify sensitive personal data of a candidate in the system. Please note that this tag does still not trigger any functionality in the system, but will be further enhanced in coming releases. So for now, you can quite simply ignore this attribute, but just note that in your configurations, this field attribute must be set to false. So we'll go back to the slides now, and we'll take a look at the field labels and the field descriptions. So the field label is the visible portion of the field. So this appears the same to both internal and external candidates, to recruiters and all other users. So it's not currently possible to define different field labels in the system. There will be one field label, and then based on the languages that you're using in the system, we can provide different translation labels. You can see here, the first label here is your default label. And after that, you have translation labels where we specify the language. So for example here, German, English Great Britain, English US, and Spanish. So if for any reason on the recruiting career site, the candidate is not using any of these four languages, so Spanish, English US, English GB, or German, the system will use the default translation label, which is the first one here, which happens to be in English. It says first name. The field description then, this is an optional element within the field definition, and it's quite simply a description of the field, and in some browsers the field description element will appear as a hover text in the system. So when you hover your mouse over the field in the UI, in some browsers it will display the data that's listed here. Again, within the field description, we're seeing a default where it's set to first name, and then afterwards we have translation labels for German, English GB, English United States, and Spanish. If you want to change the label of the field, the change can be made directly in the XML template. And this will apply to the candidate profile template, the application template, and the offer template. And what I mean by that is if you want to change a field label, you can do so directly in either of these templates. There's one exception to this statement, and that's in the job requisition template, where in the job requisition template, we also have job requisition system field labels. This is both in provisioning and in admin center, where you can see here that, for example, salary max, this is a field, and here you can edit and change the label. So I'm going to quickly just show you that in XML. So for example, we have a field here with the ID first name. You can see here that using English Great Britain, the translation label here is birth name. If I wanted to change this, so for example, if this was to become first name, so now it's also going to have the label first name when using English Great Britain, that's how we make the change. But remember, in order to save this into the system, we would need to copy the contents of this XML document. We would need to paste it into the text editor in provisioning and click Save Form. We will move on to take a look now at the different field types in the system. So again, we have another reminder on this slide which states, for standard fields, there is already a predefined field type associated to the field ID. An example given here is first name. This must be type text. And for the standard field country, this must be type pick list. Some examples of different field types are displayed on the screen here. So a text field is a single line of alphanumeric text with a 100 character limit. Whereas a text area, again, this is alphanumeric text, but we have a much larger character limit, which is 256. So this is shown as a 100 character wide box. So the difference here between text and text area, we'll see in a couple of minutes when we look at the UI, but text area is simply quite a larger field, and it allows much bigger input for larger pieces of text. A date field is manually entered, meaning using your keyboard, or can be selected from a calendar picker. This displays as month, day, year, or as day, month, year. So again, this format of the date is depending on the selected language pack. So if you're using English US, for example, you may expect to see the date format is day, month, year. A number field. This is a value with 2 decimal places, and again, we're seeing here formatted by locale. Formatted by locale here means that if we're using a German language, we might expect to see 2 decimal places, but they are going to be separated by a comma compared to a decimal point when using English or English US. A pick list field. These are field options which come from a pick list which is defined in Admin Center. So this is shown as a drop-down list, but it's using what's called a pick list or a pick list ID. So this is something that's centrally managed in the system. Example here might be the country pick list, which comes from Admin Center. If your country pick list comes from Admin Center, this means that it can be reused in different templates throughout the system. So you may want to use the country pick list on the candidate profile, but also in the application or the offer. So this is a centrally managed list of values. So for example, you may have Ireland, the United Kingdom, the United States of America in a list as per the ISO guidelines. On the next slide, we'll see a more complete list of the field types. So some other field types we'll see here on this list may be percent or Boolean, and this full list is available in the implementation guide. There is also a note here saying that you don't change a field type in your candidate profile. So for example, if you had a custom field and it is type date, you should not change this field type to any other field type such as number or text. If you're changing a field type like that, it is going to cause an application error or may cause inconsistent data in the database. The recommendation here is that you would create a new custom field and you would use the new field type. Now we have an exercise where I ask you to take a look at this field definition and try to understand and explain what you can see and tell me a little bit about this field. So this is a field definition for a field which is called address. We see ID is equal to address. The type is text, meaning that the type of data that we require for this field is text, meaning it'll be alphanumeric characters. Required equals false. So this is not a mandatory field. This means that we do not need to provide a value in order to save the profile. Custom is equal to false. Remember, if we see custom equals false, this means it's a standard field, which means the field ID address is coming from the implementation guide, and it must use the associated field type for the standard field, which is type text. Anonymize is equal to true. This means that this field will contain sensitive or personally identifiable information, which means that when we are anonymizing or removing data from the system, we must also anonymize the value here for address. So the example here is that if your address could be your house number is 12 on some street, that is identifiable, so it must be removed. And lastly, we have sensitive is equal to false. And if you remember correctly from a couple of moments ago, this attribute currently does not have any functionality and it must be set to false.